So, for today's show on the Pathmark Presents podcast, I have a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Jack Paxton, who is the co-founder of Vyper. And essentially what they're doing at Vyper is to provide the capability to create viral contests and reward programs. And obviously, as we know on social, that plays a big role. So we're very curious to learn from Jack, all about the product, the clients, and also how he's thinking about growth for the company. So, Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lucas. Really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Very cool. So maybe give us your, quick summary on Vyper. What is it all about in your own words?
Yeah, sure. So Vyper started many years ago, and it's really, in the simplest terms, a platform where you can build giveaways and contests. Where it differentiates is you have the ability to use gamification and incentivization to, build a more interesting campaign.
Very, very good. And, what would you say is, it's quite natural, like probably in the influencer space, but where do you see the main use cases?
Yeah, so we see, just because we have like a strong background in e-commerce, we do see a lot of e-commerce brands using giveaways. It's a great way to build their email list, their SMS list. And also, as I was talking about the gamification, we see a lot of people like gamifying and incentivizing specific social actions, like tagging friends, sharing content, liking stuff, all those different things that usually organically happen, but at a much slower rate than you would like them to. So it really fits in the e-commerce space, just because you have such a direct kind of return on investment. Whereas the SaaS companies that use it, they are more so looking at the long term and generating the email list, nurturing that for a while before they then go and convert into customers. And they usually like to do the reward style rather than the giveaway or contest, or they'll be using it for like a leaderboard. So I would say majority of it is e-commerce, and then there's a small segment that use it for waiting lists, leaderboards, and referral programs.
Very cool. So a couple of use cases there with a little different focus for e-commerce and SaaS. Super interesting. With those different sort of clients in mind, like how do you think about the actual journey of individuals getting to know Vyper, right? Like what are the channels that they're getting to hear about you guys and getting started?
Yeah, so we've tried a lot over the years, because we also have an ad marketing agency, so we've done a lot of paid advertising stuff. And so a lot of our focus early on went into running ads to webinars, running ads to PDF downloads and lead magnets, running ads to direct sales, so trying to get people to convert just from seeing ads, that sort of stuff. We realized that didn't work too well. So now we sort of like laid off social advertising, and we really invest in search advertising only, because you just have such high intent for when people are doing comparisons of like different giveaway software, or different contest software, or trying to find a platform like giveaways for Facebook or YouTube giveaway platforms. You have much higher search intent. So we do, a large, I would say like 20 to 30% of our acquisition sort of comes from paid search. And then we have probably like 30 to 40% coming from organic. So we create a lot of content now. We didn't used to be too heavy on the content, and then we sort of started seeing the value in SEO, building up long-term kind of traffic sources through long tail keywords, getting very specific, like, Mother's Day giveaway example post. That sort of stuff that people would be looking for like inspiration, or if they're actually running a Mother's Day giveaway. So as you have built up those over the years, that's kind of started to contribute more and more and more to not only our email list, but also, people signing up. And then I would say the last 30% is probably email. So once they get onto the email list, we nurture them through there, and, just keep providing value, keep giving examples, case studies, that sort of stuff.
Makes a lot of sense. Actually, we had a couple of listeners reaching out to ask specifically about webinars. Obviously, since there seems to be somewhat of a revival recently, like what you mentioned, your experience there, like, what has been your experience with webinars? Are they just like too, far away from conversion, or what was your experience?
I think once we sort of ran all the ads, and then we got the, how many signups we got, then how many people showed up, and how many people stayed to the end, and then how many people actually purchased from that. even in a post email drip of like, here's a recording, here's extra information, here's a promotion just for people who watch the webinar. We found that just like didn't really convert at a high enough rate to make the time and money investment, be positive. So I think, it did work earlier on. And then I think we just saw people fatiguing a little bit. They weren't so interested in sitting through long webinars because everybody was doing it for a while. You can't sit all day on every different platform's webinar. So I think it was too much in the discovery stage. And then so we went down a little bit closer and we were just like looking for people who actually were ready to run a giveaway or contest. And that's when we started seeing a much better ROI, especially in terms of time, because, ads have a great return on time because you kind of set them up, you optimize them. And then once you find some stuff that's working, it's not too much work in comparison to like, doing live webinars or setting up webinars and that sort of stuff.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Is there any sort of channels or approaches that you're excited about moving forward?
Yeah, I think, I keep diving deeper and deeper into SEO and I think the content side of it is really interesting. I am still trying to figure out the best way to use social platforms. So providing value, turning social traffic and engagement into actual engaged customers or even email leads. So haven't quite cracked the secret code on that one. And also because the platforms keep changing and people don't really like following brands. People really like to follow people.
Yeah.
And so I do think social is kind of hard for SaaS brands to make that a good stream of traffic and leads. But I would love to sort of get a little bit more successful in like, Reddit and some of those more sort of niche social platforms. And it's always interesting seeing like Clubhouse come up, TikTok come up, all these new platforms that may turn into something. And right now the organic reach is fantastic because that's always how a platform starts. They have great organic reach, they reward the creators, the early people to jump on the platform, build massive followings, and then maybe in the next 2 or 3 years that those followings actually end up becoming more valuable. So I'd be interested to see where it goes, but yeah, still excited about social and trying to get that to work. And then also memberships and communities. I think that's kind of like the way that it's going. And it's like getting much more niche into like people who are just interested in these specific things are in this membership group. Or, you saw that a little bit with Facebook groups, but then Facebook got a bit greedy and the reach in that started to drop a lot and the engagement started to drop a lot as people sort of started shifting their focus away from Facebook. I think in the most, probably in the last 1 to 2 years, there's not as much engagement as I used to see in like Facebook groups and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, makes a whole lot of sense. I'm curious about the website as well a little bit. Where do you see the strengths of the website at the moment? Just a quick remark, we're obviously talking a lot here in the Pathmark Presents podcast about websites. So, I would taking this for granted that this is really a major, part for you guys. What do you consider a strength of the website at the moment?
Yeah, so we've really tried to go with simplicity. Super stripped down, super clear value proposition. Early on, we were doing way too many things. We were doing like pop-ups, content upgrades. We were doing all sorts of different tools and trying to like mesh them into this one thing. And then we went through a few pivots, rounds of revision, and we kind of like narrowed it down to, this is our core value proposition. We really help people run viral giveaways and contests. That's the main value proposition. So focusing on that messaging, I think was a really big strength to the website, being much more focused and then simplifying it. So like getting rid of a ton of stuff and just making it super clear. Hey, this is what we do. Here's some examples. Here's some testimonials. Sign up here. And then jump straight into it. And then the onboarding is, we used to have like a more complex onboarding with like videos and like check the list and that sort of stuff. And then we actually just went even simpler and we just like drop them straight in to choose their first campaign. And then they go straight into building that campaign and they can really knock out a giveaway build in like, 30 minutes. And you can go through that whole process very quickly, understand the value and build something and see the value very quickly. Whereas we used to make it a lot harder and we thought we were giving more information. We thought we were helping more with the onboarding, but simpler ended up being better.
Sometimes interesting, right? How much work you shouldn't maybe have done, but
Yeah.
it's a learning process. Very interesting.
You never know. You got to try it, and then sometimes I know for some companies it works extremely well. You add an onboarding, and that onboarding works extremely well at getting your maybe free trials into paid customers, or even getting people just in the door to create accounts. But yeah, I think in terms of giveaways and contests, it's really about like, okay, I want to do this quickly. I want to see the value straight away. And, we did make it so that our platform was a lot more customizable when you're going through the building process, a lot more customizable than anything else that was out there. So I think that's what we showed on the website and showed in the first kind of like screen of when you start building your giveaway. So like, oh, wow, this is great.
Very cool. Very cool. So there's moments to value. It seems to be very important there. Very nice. What do you see room for improvement, like moving forward? Like what else, do you see coming for the site?
Yeah, so I think in terms of optimizing, I do think there is value in possibly adding, reminders and adding drop-off triggers. So maybe someone gets to step 2 of the 4 steps to launch their giveaway, getting more engaged and getting those people back in is probably where we could improve. I would say, whether that's, we already do somewhat of an email sequence around that, but maybe adding in SMS for that, maybe getting, a more kind of like in-app experience. So as they're going through and they're about to leave, putting some in-app notifications, that sort of stuff. So I think there are ways to definitely improve that, because the real value we get is because it's free to go and create your campaign with Vyper. So you go in, then you can build everything, you can see how it all looks. You only need to pay when you want to launch it. So our most important metric is getting people to complete their giveaway and then launch it. So we really want to get them through all of those steps as quickly as possible and get them happy with something so that they're ready to pay and launch it, because it's no good us getting people in the door and then them not finishing the giveaway build, because we're never going to get the revenue from that. No matter how much we've paid for that lead, if they don't finish their giveaway build, we don't get any ROI. So, improving that completion rate is something that we definitely see areas for improvement.
I see. Super, super interesting. I would love to switch gears like a little bit and, to talk a little bit more generic about growth and in your learnings for, such products. What would you say is the biggest challenge when you're thinking, about growth and maybe marketing for that matter, when it comes to bringing in innovation for your own strategies?
Yeah, so we've started, I think going more top of the funnel. So we've started a podcast, we've started creating content that's not just SEO optimized. We started creating content that's actually kind of like shareable, interesting content. So yeah, I think we've definitely moved further up the funnel. And now that we have multiple brands, kind of like sharing the resources between those brands or those products, and looking at kind of like how can we create as much awareness as possible and then funnel them to the correct place, I think is what we've sort of changed in our strategy. Is that sort of what you meant, or do you mean on the product level?
No, that was great. Like figuring out like where do you see room for really bringing in innovation? In your case, it seems to be starting on a bottom funnel type of content ads and then moving upwards.
Yeah.
Super interesting. We talk also about tracking quite a bit here because, different, everybody comes with a sort of a different stack of tracking to figure out what's going on the page, where people are coming from. Like, how do you look at that?
So there's a range of things. So we've obviously definitely always used Google Analytics because that's, the standard 101 setting up everything. And then we go and use a tool called Inspectlet. So Inspectlet allows you to essentially just watch what the user is doing as they go through your product. So you can really identify pain points or issues that they come across at a certain step. So that really helps you identify where those drop-off points are, and you can actually see when maybe someone can't find something they're looking for. So that's really helpful. We tried Mixpanel, but we didn't really get it to work too well. And so we ended up reverting from that. And then we use Baremetrics for all of the kind of like MRR tracking and all that sort of stuff. We use that for all of our cancellations and everything. So you can kind of collect user feedback from why they canceled, and then you can, send out follow-up emails that try and get them to resubscribe. So I would say those are kind of like the main tracking things we use. And then we test like new stuff every now and again to be like, okay, yeah, someone said test segment, so we'll maybe go test segment for a bit. But yeah, tracking is definitely tough. I would say, because we have a much simpler app now as well, tracking has been much more streamlined. When we used to have all these different tools and all these different things you could do, it became way harder to track everything and understand what people are doing. But now that we have kind of like one focal goal, it's much easier and much it's a much more streamlined tracking process.
Super interesting. You mentioned that, tracking, obviously on the product side we spoke about, and on the website side of things, like, is there something where you'd say, we really would like to know this one, or like, because it has been so interesting conversations of what is actually the information that is missing and how people are fiddling it together. Like, what is something that you would, love to know about visitors coming to the page?
I think it's more so than just looking at data. It's more so getting people's actual feedback on sending in an email, jumping on a call, watching them have an issue, because the data can tell you so much, but the actual thought process that's going through the head of the customer doesn't track in any of these platforms. So, setting up triggers to try and get people to jump on calls when they like don't finish something, or when they're like close to finishing something, that's the stuff that we're really interested in. Having that conversation with them and being like, okay, well, why is this? And then they like go into this massive story about how they've like tried 3 different platforms. They like this about this one. They didn't like it about this one. The reason they found Vyper was XYZ, but the reason they didn't finish their giveaway was because these things happened, or these things they couldn't do. Like, that data is super, super valuable compared to just collecting like, dots on a chart.
Yeah, makes a whole lot of sense.
So I think that's definitely something we're more interested in. But then obviously, simplifying tracking is super important. Like, I would love platforms to just have a much more streamlined setup without pulling in developers, without kind of like, having so much code that's like not tracking the right thing, or it's not tracking the thing that I want to track. The really interesting thing is how Facebook has recently updated it so that you can essentially just go and place all your tracking by opening a window, and you're like, okay, I want to place tracking on this button. Okay, I want to trace tracking on this URL or this form entry. And so that's a really good step, I think, in the right direction for helping marketers set up tracking a lot easier, because the marketer wants the tracking and they want that set up, but they need to go to the developer to get it all done and set up. And the developer doesn't necessarily know exactly what they should be tracking. They don't necessarily know what the marketer wants to look at. And there's always that, constant back and forth, which complicates the process. Whereas that ability to go and, just tag things or add things just with the visually, I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, super interesting. Let's switch gears a little bit, since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview. We'd love to jump into our rapid fire questions to learn, a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure, let's do it.
What's the last book that you read?
I'm actually Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. I decided to go through that again the other day.
That's interesting.
The other day, but it's taken me a while to get through it.
It's a thick one, right?
Very thick, yeah.
Very good. What's the one single thing that you're focused on the most for the company at the moment?
Top of funnel strategies, podcast, content, SEO. We know ads like the back of our hands, so that was kind of like done. We've got that one checked. Now moving on to the strategies that we're less familiar with.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for Vyper today?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, I think GDPR and regulation is kind of ruining data collection. So I would say having, much easier sign in, much easier tracking, so that you're auto logged in, everything's auto tracked for the customer. Less friction in entering, getting reminders, tracking, all that sort of stuff. I think it's too much friction now.
Mhm. And the very last question would be, what would be one advice that you would give yourself if today would be your very first day working, on Vyper?
God, talk to more customers. Yeah, always. You always think you know what's right, but in fact, what's going through the customer's mind is probably completely different from what you think it is.
Very good, very good. Jack, I really appreciate that you were on the show with us today for Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word, right? If somebody would forget everything that we discussed about Vyper today, what would be the one thing that they should remember?
Yeah, well, sure. You can find me at jackpaxton.com. You can see all the projects we're working on. Takeaway note would be, pay attention to your customer, give them what they want, don't make assumptions, and, start thinking about top of the funnel. The direct response error is, getting pushed out, and, top of the funnel awareness and then nurturing is quickly becoming much more important for brands, especially SaaS.
Thanks a lot for being part of Pathmark Presents.
Thanks, Lucas. Bye.